Right, here's something that'll surprise you. While everyone bangs on about Her Majesty's Rolls-Royces and Bentleys, she actually owned a 1960s Vauxhall Cresta, worth less than a decent used hatchback today. We're counting down the 15 cheapest cars in Queen Elizabeth's collection, and I'll tell you what, these humble workhorses tell a far more interesting story than the state parade cars ever could. Let's start with the crown jewel of the affordable royal cars. This XJ represents everything brilliant about British luxury car manufacturing in its final golden age. The 4.0-litre straight six makes about 235 horsepower, and the combination of power, refinement and handling made it one of the finest luxury saloons in the world. The palace used several XJs throughout the 1980s and 90s as secondary state cars, and this particular example was occasionally driven by the Queen herself for private engagements where full state car formality wasn't required. The Jaguar British racing green paint still gleams, and the cream leather interior has aged beautifully, developing that lovely patina that only proper leather achieves. What makes this special is that it represents the last generation of truly traditional British luxury saloons before modern manufacturing methods and corporate ownership changed everything. The walnut veneer was selected from sustainably managed British woodlands, the leather came from Scottish cattle, and even the wool carpets were woven in Yorkshire. This car is thoroughly, completely, unapologetically British in a way that modern cars simply cannot be. During a recent service, they found a handwritten note from the Queen to her mechanic, asking for slightly softer suspension tuning, showing she took a personal interest, even in the more modest cars in her fleet. There's also a pair of driving gloves in the centre console that still carry the faint scent of her preferred hand cream. A small human detail that makes this remarkable collection feel wonderfully real. The distinctive curved windscreen, a Jaguar styling signature that required complex engineering to achieve, frames the driver's view with an elegance that modern flat glass simply cannot match. Brilliant bit of British engineering here. The Discovery brought Land Rover's capability to a more civilised package, with a 3.5-litre V8 making 180 horsepower and actually comfortable seats. The Palace took delivery of several early Discoveries for estate work, appreciating their blend of capability and comfort compared to the more utilitarian Defenders. This particular example was used extensively at Balmoral, carrying shooting parties and estate workers across the Scottish Highlands in considerably more comfort than the older Land Rovers offered. The 7-seat configuration meant it could handle larger groups, and the carpeted interior could actually be cleaned properly after muddy expeditions. The Queen was photographed driving this model on several occasions, usually with family members aboard, showing she appreciated the improved refinement while maintaining that essential Land Rover capability. The odometer shows over 160,000 miles of hard Scottish use, and the body bears the scars proudly, small dents and scratches that tell stories of gates misjudged and terrain conquered. There's still a tartan blanket on the rear seats and a well-worn shooting stick in the boot. The stepped roof design, controversial when launched but now iconic, provided that crucial extra headroom in the rear that made long estate drives far more comfortable for passengers. Here's Rover's collaboration with Honda, and while purists might quibble about the Japanese underpinnings, this was a thoroughly competent executive saloon. The 2.7-litre Big Six makes about 177 horsepower, and the handling was surprisingly sharp for a car of this size. The Palace acquired several 800s in the 1990s as pool cars, appreciating their reliability and running costs compared to the traditional British luxury Marquez. This particular example served as transport for palace staff and was occasionally used by junior royals for informal engagements around London. The grey leather interior shows its age, but remains comfortable, and the electronic systems, revolutionary for a British car in 1990, mostly still work perfectly. What's fascinating is that this represents a moment when the royal household acknowledged that modern Japanese-influenced engineering might actually be more sensible than clinging to traditional British makes, though they'd never say so publicly. The service history shows it covered over 200,000 miles without major issues, something that would have been unthinkable for a complex British car just a decade earlier. The distinctive wraparound rear window, designed to maximise visibility, was a bold styling choice that divided opinion at launch, but looks remarkably contemporary, even today. Right, here's the car that practically defined British government and royal transport in the 1960s and 70s. The 3.5-litre Rover V8, actually a Buick design built under licence, makes 160 horsepower and has that wonderful V8 burble that American engines do so well. The Palace kept several P5Bs in the fleet, with this particular coupe version being used by senior household staff and occasionally by the Queen herself for private drives. The raised roofline and occasional rear seats made it practical while maintaining that sporting coupe elegance, and the leather interior ages like fine wine. What makes this special is that it represents the last of the proper coach-built British luxury cars before production methods modernised in the 1980s. Every panel was carefully fitted, every piece of wood veneer selected and book-matched by hand, and the result is a build quality that's simply impossible to replicate today. The odometer shows just under 90,000 miles, and it still drives with a tightness and precision that would shame many modern cars, testament to both the original build quality and the Palace's meticulous maintenance. The distinctive grille, unchanged throughout the P5's production run, remains one of the most recognisable features of British automotive design from this golden era. Here's British luxury motoring at its most elegant. The XJ6's 4.2-litre straight six makes 170 horsepower, and the ride quality was legendary, combining Jaguar's sporting character with a smoothness that rivaled Rolls-Royce. The Palace used several XJ6s as secondary state cars for Commonwealth officials and visiting dignitaries who rated below full state car treatment, but still deserved proper British luxury. This particular example in royal blue still has the original Consul leather that's aged beautifully, and the walnut veneer was selected from trees grown on the Sandringham estate. The Queen occasionally borrowed this for private evening engagements in London, appreciating its combination of comfort and relative discretion compared to the more obvious royal vehicles. Palace mechanics remember it being remarkably reliable for a 1970s Jaguar, clocking up over 150,000 miles with only routine maintenance, which says much about how well the Palace looked after their vehicles. There's a theatre programme from a 1976 Royal Opera House performance still tucked into the rear seat pocket, suggesting Her Majesty used it for one of her rare nights out. The quad headlights, and a distinctive feature of this generation, still illuminate the road with their characteristically warm yellow glow that British cars of this era were famous for. Now here's Jaguar's attempt at a more accessible luxury saloon, and the Palace actually bought two for staff use in the early 2000s. The 2.5-litre V6 makes 194 horsepower through Jaguar's clever all-wheel drive system, making it practical for British weather while maintaining that Jaguar refinement. These served as pool cars for senior Palace staff and were occasionally used by minor royals for informal engagements, where arriving in a Bentley would seem excessive. The leather interior still has that lovely Jaguar smell, and the wood veneer, though not quite up to the standard of the state cars, adds a touch of traditional British luxury. What's touching is that after one was retired from royal service, it was sold to a palace secretary who'd admired it for years, continuing the Queen's tradition of looking after her staff. The other remains in the collection as a reminder that even in the 21st century, the royal household understood the value of having ordinary, reliable British cars in the fleet alongside the parade cars. The satellite navigation system, installed by the Palace IT department, still has saved routes to every major royal residence programmed into its memory. Right, folks, if you're enjoying these stories about Her Majesty's more humble cars, do us a favour and hit that like button, drop a comment telling us which of these working cars you'd most like to own, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next video. Now let's crack on with number 9. Right, this is the Defender that became an absolute icon of British motoring. The 2.5-litre diesel 4-cylinder makes just 68 horsepower, but it pulls like a train and returns nearly 30 miles per gallon, which mattered even to someone with the Queen's resources. This was Her Majesty's daily driver around the royal estates for over 20 years, chosen for its practicality and near indestructibility rather than any luxury pretensions. The body shows the honest scars of rural life, small dents from errant sheep, scratches from overhanging branches, and a cracked headlight lens that she refused to replace, saying it still worked perfectly well. The green canvas seats are worn smooth from decades of use, and there's a walking stick holder custom fitted to the transmission tunnel that she specified herself. Palace staff remember her driving this right up until her final years, often alone except for her dogs, enjoying the freedom and solitude that came so rarely in her public life. The registration number, which she kept through several Defenders, was considered her lucky number and appeared on most of her personal vehicles throughout 7 decades. The distinctive smell of diesel, damp canvas and Scottish heather still permeates the interior, creating an authentic time capsule of rural royal life. Here's something most people don't associate with royalty: a proper 1980s executive saloon from Vauxhall. The 3.0-litre straight 6 makes about 180 horsepower, and the ride quality was remarkably good for a car at this price point. The Palace acquired several Senators for staff and minor official transport, appreciating their blend of comfort and economy compared to the thirsty V8s in the state cars. This particular example served as a pool car for over 15 years, racking up nearly 300,000 miles ferrying officials, staff, and occasionally junior members of the royal family who didn't warrant one of the formal vehicles. The grey velour interior is still original, showing its age but remarkably intact, and the walnut effect dashboard trim has that wonderful 1980s character that's become quite fashionable again. What's fascinating is finding the service book showing it received more meticulous maintenance than most people's Bentleys, with Palace mechanics treating every car in the fleet with equal respect regardless of its value or prestige. The digital dashboard, cutting-edge technology in 1985, still functions perfectly with its distinctive green LED displays that transport you straight back to the decade of shoulder pads and Thatcher. Here's the evolution of Britain's greatest working vehicle. The Series 2 brought refinements like better electrics and improved seating, with the 2.25-litre diesel 4-cylinder making about 62 horsepower and legendary torque for working the land. The Palace took delivery of several Series 2s throughout the 1960s, and this particular example was the Queen's personal choice for Sandringham shooting parties. The modifications are minimal but practical, reinforced rear springs for carrying game, and a custom gun rack fitted behind the front seats. What makes this special is that it's the vehicle the Queen was photographed driving countless times over the decades, often with corgis in the back and usually covered in mud from the Norfolk estate. The green paint has faded to a lovely patina that restoration experts deliberately preserved, and the seats still smell of gun oil and wet dog, exactly as a proper working Land Rover should. During a recent service, they found a handwritten estate management note stuffed into the door pocket, detailing tree plantings and wildlife observations in her distinctive hand. The rear tow hitch shows significant wear from decades of pulling trailers loaded with everything from fence posts to hay bales across the royal estates. Now this is proper British utility motoring, one of the earliest series up Land Rovers, with the 1.6-litre petrol 4-cylinder making just 50 horsepower, but capable of going absolutely anywhere. The Queen took delivery of this in the early 1950s for use around Balmoral and Sandringham, and it quickly became her favourite for estate work. The permanent 4-wheel drive and low-range gearbox meant it could handle the Scottish Highlands in any weather, which the Queen tested thoroughly during decades of stalking and estate management. This particular vehicle has the rare factory-fitted canvas tilt rather than a hardtop, which she preferred because it gave better visibility of the surrounding countryside. The chassis shows honest wear from decades of proper use, with scratches and dents that tell stories of gates misjudged and streams forded. Staff recall her driving this well into her 80s, refusing to let age stop her from personally checking on her estates, and there's a small tartan blanket still folded on the rear seat that she used for impromptu picnics. The original toolbox remains mounted to the bulkhead, still containing period-correct spanners, and a starting handle that she apparently knew how to use. Brilliant piece of British manufacturing here. The Velox was Vauxhall's upmarket saloon, sitting just below the Cresta in their range, with a 2.6-litre six-cylinder, making about 95 horsepower. This particular example was bought specifically for Prince Philip to use when he wanted something more ordinary than his sports cars but didn't need a state vehicle. The 3-speed column change and bench seats made it practical for estate work, and Philip reportedly appreciated how invisible it was, just another British saloon on the road. The odometer shows over 140,000 miles, testament to how much it was actually used rather than just kept for show. Palace mechanics remember Philip would often service it himself in the Windsor garage, changing the oil and adjusting the carburettors because he enjoyed the mechanical work. There's still a toolbox in the boot with his initials scratched on the lid and a well-worn Vauxhall workshop manual with grease stains on the pages about valve adjustments. The two-tone paint scheme, cream over maroon, was Philip's personal choice and remains in beautiful original condition. Here's Ford's answer to the middle-class British family car, and the Palace had several for staff use. This Consul came with the 1.7-litre four-cylinder, making just 59 horsepower, which meant it wasn't fast, but it was economical and utterly dependable. The Queen's security detail used these for reconnaissance drives before official visits, checking routes and timing without drawing attention that a royal car would attract. The bench front seat could accommodate 3 people, and the column-mounted gear change meant you could squeeze a fourth in if needed, which apparently happened more than once during coronation preparations in 1953. What's touching is that after this car was retired from royal service in 1962, the Queen authorised its sale to a palace footman for £50, about half its market value at the time because she appreciated his loyalty. That footman's grandson still owns it today and occasionally brings it back for palace reunions. The simple dashboard with its single large speedometer represents an era when cars were straightforward and honest, without pretension or unnecessary complexity. Right, this Austin Princess represents everything about conservative British motoring in the immediate post-war years. The 4-litre straight six made a respectable 130 horsepower, and the ride quality was legendarily smooth thanks to its long wheelbase and soft suspension. This particular example served as a secondary state car for minor official functions where full royal pomp wasn't required, saving the more expensive Daimlers and Rolls-Royces for important occasions. The coachwork was built to last generations, with panels so thick you could stand on them, which explains why it's still in remarkable condition today. Palace records show it covered over 200,000 miles during 3 decades of service, mostly ferrying officials and dignitaries who didn't quite warrant the top-tier vehicles. The registration plates were deliberately ordinary looking, and the deep burgundy paint was chosen specifically because it photographed as black in newspapers, making it appear more formal than it actually was. The rear compartment still has the original occasional seats that fold down from the division, perfect for carrying extra palace staff to events. Here's a car that every British family in the 1950s aspired to own. This particular Zephyr came into royal service as a pool car for staff, but ended up being used far more than anyone expected. The 2.6-litre six-cylinder made about 85 horsepower, and while that sounds modest now, it was considered quite sprightly for a family saloon in those days. The Palace garage kept 3 of these in rotation, and this Survivor still wears its original Thames grey paint that Ford made famous. What's remarkable is how the Queen understood the value of having ordinary British cars in the fleet, not just for practicality, but to show solidarity with her subjects who drove the same cars. During a recent inspection, they found the original owner's handbook tucked in the glove box with handwritten service notes from the Palace mechanics, including one entry that simply reads HRH borrowed for Ascot week, returned with slight grass stain on rear seat. The steering wheel shows genuine wear from thousands of miles of use, not the pristine condition you'd expect from a museum piece. Right, here's the most affordable royal car, a proper British motoring from the people's car maker. This Cresta was one of several Vauxhall saloons the palace kept for staff transport, and occasional royal use when discretion mattered more than grandeur. The straight-six engine made around 115 horsepower, nothing spectacular, but reliable as a Swiss watch. What makes this fascinating is that the Queen occasionally borrowed it for private shopping trips to Windsor town centre, preferring its anonymity over the attention a royal car would bring. Palace mechanics maintained it to the same exacting standards as the Bentleys, with service records showing it received fresh oil every 3,000 miles without fail. The interior still has the original vinyl bench seats that were easier to clean than leather, and there's a small dent in the driver's door that staff deliberately left untouched after the Queen nudged a gate post at Sandringham in 1967. The chrome bumpers still shine brilliantly despite decades of British weather, testament to the palace's meticulous care routine. Well, there you have it. 15 of the most affordable and honest cars in Queen Elizabeth's collection, proving that Her Majesty appreciated practical British engineering just as much as royal grandeur. If you've enjoyed this look at the working side of royal cars, make sure you subscribe to Britain's Best and click on the next video on your screen. Cheers!